Before we move on, I'd just like to say a quick thank you to the members of the creative panel who set the theme and sub-themes for this year's conference, and a great selection of speakers that we're all looking forward to seeing. The panel members include Hannah Hopewell from Victoria University Wellington, our esteemed panel chair, Jared O'Connell from Ruffin Milne in Wanaka, Rangitahi Kawe from Boffa-Miskell. We have, as he put it one day, we have many rangatahi, but we have only one rangitahi. Hannah O'Donoghue from Boffa-Miskell in Auckland, and Richard Hart, our Tauranga branch rep. And there is one member of the panel who we sadly no longer have with us, and that is Megan Wraight. It was with great sadness that we lost Megan last year. She made a huge contribution to our profession, and a small part of that was including help define the conference theme and sub-themes and the direction of this conference. So I think as we go through the conference, be thinking of Megan. And so at the time of her passing last year, there were gathering restrictions, and the funeral service was a limited sort of close family and friends affair. And so now is probably the first time that we've had a chance as a larger collective whānau in our industry to come together and remember Megan. And to do so, I'd like to welcome Nicole Thompson and Di Lucas to the stage to say a few words about Megan.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko tititia te māka whakaruru, te matao, te awa, te whakaora, ko Taris o, ke ototahi, tōku kāika. Ko Di Lucas, tōku ikiwa, he horunuku, kai whakahirihiri o, Reira, tēnā koutou katoa. It is with great sadness that I stand here to remember our darling Megan. Back in 1993, I tried to get, I failed, one of my many failures, to get the Institute to look at the gender diversity in what we did in the profession. And in 1993, celebrating New Zealand first in the world from the centennial of the vote, for women getting the vote, I wanted to look at this gender differences in our work we did. Very few women were then leading construction projects, implementation projects. But that was right at the time that Megan graduated from RMIT and started over here in New Zealand. And she set up practice in 98. And Megan, as we all know, was fantastic in understanding the specialness of this wonderful land that we are so lucky to work within. That it's a bicultural country, that it's a very diverse country for its nature, and Megan grasped that. And she grasped it in the big picture, she grasped it in the detail, and she took it right through. And she challenged the brief, an essential task, that too many forget, in my opinion, but she took everything on, she challenged it all, and she made such wonderful places through our country. And from the ones in Auckland, you know, with and Wellington and Waitangi Park, and I was so lucky at the conference in 2018 in Wellington that after it, Megan took us for a tour of Pukeahu, and that was fantastic to explain the detail and the origin of all the materials, all the stories, everything within that place. So she was so marvellous, and we were so lucky. And she lives on, and she lives on in these places. She lives on for us all. She gave me a brief that I haven't yet undertaken, and I'm sure she's watching to see if I get into gear and do the project that she wants. A really important project about the place that she loves, that she wants me to weave into a future, because she understood the importance of change, the changing world, with climate change, and what we need to do, and especially in managing not just the urban design that she's so well known for, but managing the rural landscape that has been rather forgotten by the profession over these last few decades. So thank you, Megan, thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Di. That's lovely. Morena koutou, ngā mihi nui ki koutou I tēnei rā. Nā mauna ki ka rangi te mauna, ko Paramata te awa, no pōhakana aho, e noho ana o ki pōneke. E mahi ana o ki Wraight, me ngā hoa, ko Thompson toku whānau, ko Nicole aho. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nicole Thompson, and forgive me, I'm going to read this because I'm nowhere near as eloquent as Di. Up until the 31st of August last year, I was the co-director of Wraight & Associates with Megan Wraight, who on that day, surrounded by her family and a handful of friends, slipped quietly away from us. Which I have to say was slightly unlike Megan. She didn't very often slip quietly into or away from anything. Before I get into the weeds, first a thank you to the Institute for affording this time to pay tribute to Megan in what I know is a jam-packed schedule. It really does mean an awful lot to us, her work colleagues, and those here who considered her a friend. For those of you who didn't know Megan, I can only hope I do her some justice with these words and perhaps give you a small glimpse into the person she was to us as a practice. It's with an enormous sense of gratitude that I stand before you today to talk about Megan, the founding director of Wraight & Associates, a force for and of nature. I'm grateful for the way in which she demonstrated, and this wasn't just demonstrated to me, that a strong woman with a clear vision can make a sizable difference, and that it's absolutely, fundamentally important to have lots of belly laughs along the way. Unlike this room today, there's not a lot of laughing going on, but that's okay, we'll work ourselves up to it. It's nigh on impossible to sum up any one person in an assemblage of words, ideas and sentiments that is recognisable to all who may have known them. It's equally impossible to convey a full sense of that person, to give due respect to their many facets, to cover all of their triumphs and celebrate all of their awesomeness. So I'm going to stick to my knitting, which Megan was told to do that by a very influential politician once in an Auckland meeting, and boy, did he regret saying those words. And I'll talk a little bit about the landscape architect Megan Wraight that I knew as a phenomenally creative talent and an incredibly staunch friend. She was also a wickedly good party thrower, but that's a story for another speech. And despite appearances thus far, I am going to keep this brief, I promise. Over the past wee while, as I've slogged up hills of the wild and woolly Wellington that Megan loved, and I mean really loved, which I've got to say to this feeble Australian is sometimes a challenging concept to get on board with, I'm often given pause to think of Megan and her relationship to the land. Many have spoken of her tenacity and passion, but when I think of Megan, I think of the landscape architect who had an uncanny knack to conceive convincing concepts at which she would arrive quickly with steadfast conviction. Within half an hour of being on a site, she could see it transformed in her mind's eye and almost just as quickly have it drawn up with her blue clutch pencil that was never far from her reach. I think for me it was the conviction with which she stood by her creative outpourings that sticks with me most. Her ability to grasp the essence of something and transform that essence into a compelling and resonating reality. I've no doubt that she will long be remembered for her collaborations in Wellington with Asfield Architects on Waitangi Park and Pukeahu National War Memorial Park, and her collaboration in Auckland with Australian landscape architects Taylor Cullity Lethlean on Jellicoe Street. But equally, I think she'll be remembered with great fondness by the many residential clients over the years for whom she devoted an enormous amount of time and energy to reveal the hidden treasures held within their land and gardens. And not to mention her Arts Laureate Award, which she received in 2013. And I may be wrong in saying this, but I think to date she's the only landscape architect to have received such an award. I'm by no means an expert on Megan Wraight. In fact, I know there are many people in this room who knew Megan for far longer than I did. But I do know that all of us at Wraight & Associates are without a doubt better landscape architects for having had her in our midst. And there is many a landscape in Aotearoa that is all the better for having, at one time or another, captured her attention and in turn sparked her extraordinary imagination. I miss Megan as a friend immensely. I miss her indomitable spirit, her forthrightness, her generosity, her cleverness and her support, which she gave unfailingly even when she wasn't feeling 100%. I miss her suggestions. She always had one at the ready, solicited or otherwise. I miss the uncontrollable giggles and I miss dancing until our feet were sore. Wherever you are, Megan, I hope you go well, whilst I'm sure you're giving them hell. Thank you.